Welcome, Yamhill County, to Speaking Frankly. I'm your host, Howie Harkema, and our tagline is, "And how we doin'?" Today I have two special guests with me. Stephanie Bell Findley, who's the Yamhill County Democrats Chair, and Megan Corvus from Progressive Yamhill. Thank you so much for being here today, Stephanie.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
Really looking forward to this conversation. So let's talk about the 2018 midterm election results. It was a very successful night for the Democrats.
Here
It
in the
was.
state, yes.
Yes, across the nation.
Yeah, I think we're still waiting on some results,
Yes.
but yes.
Well, let's talk about state of Oregon governor's race between Kate Brown and Newt Buehler first.
I think that was a really exciting race, and coming into it, we thought it was a lot closer than it ended up
Sure.
being, and I think that felt good to a lot of progressive people here in Yamhill County and across the state, that it was not nearly as close as they had anticipated going into it.
Right. Megan, any thoughts?
Well, I think, yes, a lot of people were concerned because the news was suggesting that it might be tighter. In fact, we even got some national attention for the fact that, I think it was in the New York Times, the suggestion that the race might be really tight.
Right.
I suspect that the Kate Brown campaign didn't mind that headline because it could only help to bring out voters on their side.
Right.
I think Newt Buehler there was a wide field of Republican candidates who ran in the primary, and Newt Buehler was definitely the moderate coming out of that race. And I think running a moderate is a tactic that both Democrats and Republicans are looking at.
Sure.
As we see, states and regions becoming more divided politically, more partisan. And I think what we saw in the election nationally even is that might not really be the winning tactic that people think that it is.
Right.
We saw nationally some wins, some flipping of state or local races where the person running was far to the left or outspoken about being pretty progressive, and that didn't hinder their campaign and they were able to win. Now, it didn't work for us in the Senate campaign in Texas necessarily, but he performed very well with a very progressive message, not a moderate message. And I, looking at the Kate Brown-Newt Buehler race, I think perhaps this is the flip side of that same story, is that running a moderate in a state that's pretty progressive wasn't actually a winning tactic to get voters out or to flip the state. And I thought it was interesting that immediately after the election results came out, I saw some Republican operatives in the state already commenting that the mistake was to run a moderate,
sure.
and that they wished that they had been able to go forward with one of the more conservative candidates. So I think that's interesting, and it makes me curious to see what the Republicans will bring forward in the next governor's race or the next state level races.
Sure.
And how they'll approach that.
So let's talk about the Oregon U.S. Representative for District 1, Suzanne Bonamici.
That's one where we share that with a number of more progressive counties than we have traditionally been. And so Suzanne Bonamici has been a really solid legislator for us. So I think, I think we knew that was going to happen.
Yeah.
She's solid, but it's still exciting that she continues to hold that seat.
Well, as the incumbent, it's not surprising, and she is a strong advocate. So
Yes.
No, one thing that's really fascinating about that race, though, is that this is the first time that seat she won in Yamhill County.
Right.
So just looking at Yamhill County voters, although she was expected to sail to a win across her whole district,
Sure.
in Yamhill County she lost by actually quite a bit last time in 2014.
Right.
In 2016. And so she won this time. And that has a lot to do with the fact that her opponent didn't really run much of a race this time, but it's still interesting that the Democrat in that position would win in Yamhill County. She got more votes in Yamhill County than Kate Brown did.
Yes.
Which is interesting.
Very. Let's talk about the Senate race of District 13, Sean Grider against Kim Thatcher.
So Sarah Grider.
Sarah Grider, I'm sorry.
This is an interesting race. We didn't win this race, but Sarah was a very exciting candidate. Something that's interesting about this race is that Sarah came in late to the game. We actually had somebody who won the primary, and he then resigned that nomination. And so Sarah was then got that nomination late in the game. So
Right.
she ran an amazing campaign for someone who had to make up a lot of ground after coming in late, and that is a huge Senate district. Not only is it huge in number of people, but it's huge geographically, and so it's a really hard Senate district to get to every door and get to every person. So she ran an admirable race in that field.
Yeah. And Kim Thatcher was the incumbent to begin with,
Yes.
so that's hard to win over
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about State Senator 10th District, David Gomberg versus Thomas Donahue.
Again, that's an interesting one for us in that Gomberg has just a small portion of Yamhill County, so most of his voters don't come out of Yamhill County. We consider him a very good friend to us. We know him personally. He has been a solid person in that seat for a long time, so we're happy that he won. But oftentimes Yamhill County doesn't help him a whole lot in terms of how we vote for him.
Yeah, he lost here in the 2 precincts that are in his district,
Right.
And has historically done so. And I think something that's really admirable about him is that despite the fact that that has been true historically, he continues to make the drive in from the coast and be available to Sheridan and Grand Ronde voters, even though they continue to vote against him. And it's such a tiny slice. You know, he has, I think it's maybe 2,000 or 3,000 voters here in Yamhill
Right.
County compared to tens of thousands in his coastal district. And it's a different environment. It's very different, but he still has been engaged here in
Yes.
his tiny slice of Yamhill County, and I do appreciate that.
Let's talk about Danny Jaffer versus Mike Neerman for Oregon House of Representatives 23rd District.
You want to field that one?
Oh, so this one was near and dear to my heart.
I know.
Yeah, because Mike Neerman is just disappointing as a House representative in general, regardless of politics. He's not available to his constituents. In this race, he refused to participate in any forums
Right.
or interview with any newspapers.
Which is unusual.
He hung up the phone on reporters when they called him, even for just, you know, not for a news story, but just to do a candidate conversation,
Sure.
to give him the chance to talk about his perspective, which I found really surprising. It's not like they had gotcha politics to call him on. So actually, really early in 2017, I met a couple of people in House District 23 who were starting a grassroots effort to find a candidate and run against Mike Neerman. And they found a great candidate in Danny Jaffer. He's just a really, really strong candidate, a 20-year Navy veteran, lots of leadership experience,
Sure.
a law degree, local. He was born in House District 23. Yeah, he had been a candidate before. He had run for county commissioner in Polk County previously. So really great candidate, and he put together a great team of volunteers. They worked so hard. They sent over 16,000 handwritten postcards to voters.
Right.
He knocked thousands of doors. I was disappointed to see that the results were not any tighter,
Right.
that his campaign didn't perform better, but really heartened by all the grassroots efforts that went into that. And I think the volunteers knew, and the campaign knew going into this, that this may not be a one-year effort to turn it over. It's a very red district. It's very rural.
Right.
And so people are already, looking at 2020 and talking about what they can do to continue the momentum that
Of
was
course.
begun and move forward.
And I was hoping that you would say that.
Yes.
He came off really well at the NAMI forum and was really good and engaged. And so I hope that he will continue on.
He really did his homework, and he himself, Danny Jaffer himself, knocked on so many doors and spoke to so many voters. And it's just such a difference comparing him to Neerman, who didn't even bother coming to forums or
Exactly.
making himself available.
So let's talk about Ken Moore versus Ron Noble for Oregon House of Representatives 24th District. Ken was a write-in.
He was. Yeah, all of these races are very interesting for different reasons. So Ken was a write-in. At the very last second, Ron Noble sent out a mailer to the Democrats in his district asking them to write him in as the Democratic nominee. And certainly as a Yamhill County Democrat, that was not acceptable to me or to the groups that we work with. And it was within 7 days of the election, and we mobilized and got people to write in Ken Moore's name, and he won that nomination, which is a feat in and of itself.
Well, this was during the primary.
This was during the primary. Which is a feat in and of itself. It speaks to Ken's more connection with the community, how many doors he's knocked in the past, how many people know who he is, and just how connected he is to this House district. So again, a latecomer to the game. He had not been running a primary campaign. He had not expected to run a campaign for the general midterm election, and he came through really well. He came really close. He came really close, and it was exciting. And I think again that speaks to who he is and how he has connected to our community.
Absolutely. So let's talk about Dave McCall versus Bill Post, Oregon House of Representatives 25th District.
This is one that I'm not as close to. Dave McCall is based in Kaiser, which is also where Bill Post resides. And so I think a lot of the race happened not so much in Newburgh. And I wasn't all that engaged. It didn't seem as though Dave McCall's race had quite as much of a grassroots effort, for instance, compared to House District 23. I would have loved to have seen that campaign perform better in the end, although I think actually for having not really, I didn't really see any Dave McCall signs in Newburgh, for instance, where I saw a lot of Danny Jaffer and Ken Moore signs in the other House districts. So I was impressed by how well he did in the results, considering that there wasn't a big push or a lot of grassroots effort or a lot of money being spent on advertising. So it did make me hopeful. I would really love to find a good candidate to challenge Bill Post in 2020, and that numbers made me hopeful that that's increasingly a doable.
Well, we have a few years to find somebody. So
we have a little while.
Yeah. Let's talk about the nonpartisan races. The Yamhill County Board of Commissioners, Position 1, Casey Kula versus Stan Primazich. Yay!
You echo our sentiments. That was an amazing campaign.
Yes.
If people are taking notes about how to run a campaign, that is a campaign that you would take notes about. That was a clean campaign. That was something that they worked very hard. Casey is who Casey is, and that's who he was on the campaign trail. That's who he is when you see him in person. And that was an exciting thing. It is nonpartisan, but certainly as progressives in Yamhill, we know who will work harder for us and smarter for us, and who has in interest the same things that we do. And we certainly are very excited about that. And you wouldn't know it now after seeing the numbers, but that was an uphill battle.
Yes.
But it certainly ended up much more in Casey Kula's favor than I think anyone anticipated, except for maybe Casey himself. He was pretty confident.
I know.
Which
All the way
he should
through.
have been, and it turned it out. It turned out great, and we're very excited for that.
I think that's a really great example of what a great candidate. I mean, Casey himself is very personable. He had a good base in the county. He has been a face here in the county for a while, and a name that's familiar to a lot of people. But the other thing that he brought to that campaign that I think, as you said, other campaigns in the future should look to is Casey really came with some tangible ideas about what he wanted to do. He did the research, he had the facts, and he had some big ideas to talk to voters about. And those ideas were not ideas that just appealed to one slice of the voter population, but ideas that were basic across the board, could really appeal to everyone regardless of which partisan side they may identify with. And I think that is a big part of what helped carry him to such a great success.
Yes, and he has a lot of confidence. The first thing he said to me before we even talked about the interview was, "I'm going to win." And I thought, that is the right person for that race. So I couldn't be happier. Let's talk about Yamhill Circuit Court Judge Position 2, Jennifer Chapman versus Liesl Miller.
That is a nail biter.
It is.
We know what the numbers are right now, but there is not an official call as far as I know. At this point, Jennifer Chapman is in the lead, and it is looking good for her, but we won't know until all the numbers shake out and we know exactly what that looks like.
Right.
Also a very exciting race. A lot of times there isn't an opportunity for voters to pick their judges. A lot of times what happens is a judge is appointed, and then they run as an incumbent, and often nobody runs against them. This is something different. This is something that we don't see very often, and so it's exciting when we actually get to pick the person who is going to sit on the bench and who we potentially could be before when we walk into a court.
Sure.
So this is an exciting race that voters, I hope, were really informed about. I think they were, and I think that's why we're seeing the results that we're seeing, is that people really took a look at both candidates and decided what they would like to see on the bench.
Well, we didn't need another criminal lawyer in that position, and having a civil lawyer be in that position would be awesome.
Yes.
And last check, she's 147 votes ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was very interesting that, it was another wide primary. There were several candidates back in May.
5,
with a diverse set of backgrounds to come down to Jennifer and Liesl. And Liesl running as a DA, or from the DA's office, I think was interesting just in the wider national conversation that we are having right now about the necessity of looking at our local DA's offices and the influence that they can have in judicial results or courtroom results, because they make the choice about what charges to bring. And in many cases, even here in Oregon, judges' hands are really tied in criminal settings because there is a mandatory decision to be made, so the judge doesn't have a lot of leeway. And so it really, whatever the result is, really comes from the DA's office. So in that context, I think it was also a really interesting race, and I was heartened to see that Jennifer Chapman did as well as she did, and I am hoping that she maintains her lead, but we'll see, probably another week or two before we really have
and
the
there could be
result.
a recount due to the fact that I think it's 0.2%. If you're that close, then they have to do a recount.
They're not that close right now, but it really depends on the results of the signatures.
And aren't there like 1,500 ballots that are still?
As of yesterday afternoon, there were still 1,500 ballots that were coming from outside of Yamhill County. Somebody had dropped their ballot off in Portland while they were there. So they were just, so there were still a number of ballots that still needed to be counted. And I don't know where they're at with those ballots at this point.
So let's talk about McMinnville City Council Ward 2, Sal Peralta versus Chris Chenoweth and Leanna Gottney.
Yeah, these are interesting. These are nonpartisan races, and partisanship showed up in these races this time. You know, Chris Chenoweth was backed by the Oregon Right to Life, which is an interesting choice on both Oregon Right to Life and a nonpartisan city councilor candidate. And so I think we, of course, are very excited that Sal won. You know, it's sort of a no-brainer for someone like me that he has been sitting in that seat and he's been doing a good job. But it was interesting how partisan his opponents came to the table with these seats, and it'll be interesting to see if that continues in the coming cycles. That these very local nonpartisan races are going to get the attention of groups like Oregon Right to Life, and if they're going to try to influence things on that very small local level.
Yeah. Let's talk about McMinnville City Council Ward 1, Zach Geary, and then Alan Rudin dropped out. But Alan Rudin still got quite a few votes.
He did. Yeah, well, you know, he was in the voters' pamphlet still and on the ballot, and I think, unfortunately, our local newspaper doesn't have the readership to have reached everyone with the news that he had dropped out. So it, you know, Zach didn't have to campaign much because Alan had already endorsed him basically and said that he would hand off his seat to him if he won. But I think it's great. Zach is a great addition to this community.
Absolutely.
He works so hard for the town already and is so engaged. He's just bringing already a lot of institutional knowledge about McMinnville and how McMinnville runs to the city council, even though he hasn't sat there yet. But he'll be able to really hit the ground running.
Let's talk about some measures. Measure 102, local bonds for financing affordable housing. And that one did not pass.
That is the only one that did pass.
Oh, did pass?
Yes, that one did pass.
Okay.
To our happiness. We wanted that one to pass.
Yes.
I think it's no secret that there's an affordable housing crisis all over the state, and particularly in Portland, and we are seeing it really heighten here in Yamhill County. So this is going to open up some doors for some affordable housing in our
need
county.
It so desperately.
We do. And so we are very glad that this one passed.
And it's not just for the homeless. It's for people that are coming from Portland to work in Yamhill County.
Yeah, and it's for people who are working in Yamhill County and can't afford to buy a house here.
Right.
You know, people who are working in Newburgh and McMinnville and are having to live way far out of town in order to be able to live even somewhat close to where they're working.
Yeah. This was a sort of a complicated measure because
It was.
All we were deciding was whether or not it would be legal to ask for money in the future.
Right.
We weren't actually, the measure wasn't actually asking for money now, and but it was misconstrued that way in the marketing that went out from the no on 102. So I think I'm relieved that in general that the state and Yamhill County too kind of was able to parse out what the intent of the measure was and supported it. And I'm curious to see what local bonds may come out of it now that it is legal, what future partnerships will come out that will allow us to do these projects.
Yeah, there should be a great number of them. Measure 103, prohibiting grocery taxes.
So that one failed, which we are happy about. Yay. This is a prime example of big business driving the conversation with fear.
Right.
Saying to our citizens that we are going to do something now because we think you should fear something that might happen in the future, but also then writing into these measures things that don't align with what they're actually saying in it.
Right.
So it's good that this one failed. And again, big business drove this one.
Yeah, I've heard that. And the fear tactic seems to be consistent.
Yeah.
So let's talk about 104, requirements for that 3/5 legislative majority approval of bills raising revenue.
This one also failed, even here in Yamhill County, which I was impressed by that Yamhill County voted it that way too. The argument was that it would make it, if it passed, it would make it more difficult
Right.
For the legislature to raise taxes. It's a good thing that it didn't pass, because having to go to the voters every time you need to not just raise money, but maybe even just restructure the way in which you get money would have made it very difficult for the state to operate.
Right.
The state can't go make money any other way than by raising or shifting taxes. So I'm really relieved that this didn't pass. It is a little ironic it didn't pass, but the Democrats did so well in the legislative races that they now nearly have the majorities that they need in the House and the Senate.
Yep.
Anyway,
So let's talk quickly. We've only got 3 minutes. Measure 105, sanctuary state removal of state and local law enforcement to enforce immigration laws.
We're so glad that one
Oh, man.
failed. That is near and dear to our hearts.
Yes.
You know, it makes it does not make our state safer.
Right.
That's the bottom line. It is not safe to be able to target people for the color of their skin, and we are so glad that this failed.
Yes.
It is important that we protect all of the people who live in Yamhill County, and we're very excited that this one failed. This sanctuary law was passed over 20 years ago.
Right.
This is not something that's new. Again, it's another fear-based tactic. We've been operating under this sanctuary state for a long time.
Right.
And
I was surprised it even got to be a measure.
Yes, it was surprising that it did, but we're very happy that it failed.
So quickly, let's talk about Measure 106, prohibiting public funds from being used for abortions.
again, really glad that it didn't pass, also by a landslide, so
Right.
it's really reassuring that Oregonians didn't think that was valuable. Just to go back to 105 really quickly,
Yes.
I think we should recognize the work that local organization Unidos Bridging
Yes.
Community did, and Miriam Vargas Corona, the
Right.
executive director, just worked so hard to get people out, and the fact that Measure 105 failed, even here in Yamhill County, is really a testament to how hard she worked.
Oh, I know that.
And I'm
She's
really
fantastic.
impressed. She's
She is.
amazing. Yes, we're huge fans, but she gets a lot of credit, I think, for how
Yeah.
how
does.
poorly that did here locally.
Yep. Yamhill County Democrats will start looking towards the 2020 elections. What do you see so far?
We are excited. Group of people met the day after
Sure. That's the way
the
it
elections,
works.
and we already started talking about what does this mean and where do we go, and we don't get to sort of rest on our laurels now that we feel like we've done good work. We need to continue to do that good work, and I think that we will see good things in 2020, and I think it's making sure that we are engaging with people like Danny Jaffer, Sarah Greider, so that they will be back in 2020.
Right. And Yamhill County Democrats' monthly meetings are all-inclusive for anyone, and the dates are on your website, and you also do some emails to invite people.
That's right. So anybody can come to Yamhill County Democrats meeting. We would love to have you.
And where is it?
We meet at Golden Valley Brewing in McMinnville, and we meet the fourth Thursday of every month. With the holiday schedules, it's a little bit different.
Right.
We will be meeting on the 29th of this month, November, and then we will be back on our regular schedule in January.
Perfect. So congratulations,
Thank
number
you.
one. Thank you for sponsoring this show. We've done 144 episodes since Frank retired, and Frank did it for 19 years. So we're very happy to continue Frank's work on and to support both progressives, independents, and Democrats in Yamhill County. So thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Megan.
Thanks.
And thank you for getting out and voting like you did. We're super proud that everybody got out there. We especially thank the younger people that went out in droves. And thank you for watching today.